Thank you so much for coming tonight. It's such a pleasure to celebrate this year's Rilke Prize winner, UNT Rilke Prize, David Keplinger, who wrote this fantastic book, Another City. There are copies of this book for sale up at the front of the room. If you don't have your copy yet, you should get one. You should get one tonight, and you should get one tomorrow night when you come to the reading. You should get them signed both nights, dated both nights, and then you have the complete set. And that way, it's worth more on eBay if you have the complete set. If you only have a partial set, it's not worth as much. So you want to make sure you're making as much as you can from this thing that your professor required you to do. You're here because you love poetry, right? Yes, of course. Of course, yes. Thank you. So we've been doing the Rilke Prize now for 8 years. And exactly. So it's fantastic that this thing keeps going, and it keeps getting better, and it keeps getting stronger. This year, David's book was one of nearly 220 books that came across our desks in order to make this decision. In the first year, there were 54 entries, so it's grown so much, and I think it's become, something that people talk about and pay attention to. And actually, one of the things that David told me as we were walking up is that he's grateful for the new life that the prize has given the book, because people are, they're buying it again. And I'm thrilled that we can play that role in the conversations about poetry in this country, that we can call attention to books that matter, that are powerful and well-made, and that mark, and this is really, I think, one of the things that the prize intends to do, that mark work that is really entering into that mature range that is maybe been predicted by earlier books, but that now says this is somebody who's writing at the height of their powers. And I think this is a book that absolutely does that thing. It shows us what somebody who's writing incredibly well can do with 75 pages. So again, if you're not familiar with the prize, most important thing, maybe $10,000. That's always nice, right? We forgot to print the gigantic check, so we don't have the gigantic check tonight. But at some point...
I'm sorry.
Yes.
But if you talk straight into this, everybody will hear you.
I thought I was. I'm sorry.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Yes? You couldn't hear anything I said before, could you? Right, so... I said lots of really funny and smart things. I'm sorry you missed it. Fortunately, we recorded it all, so you can check in. You can check in later. No, but so I said, we don't have the printed check, but at some point, David's going to be able to choose a prize from somewhere in this room. I'm thinking maybe he's going to go for the blue suitcase. I don't know about you. I'm kind of curious to see what's in there, but we'll find out. So it's a prize for a mid-career poet. It means somebody has to have published 2 books previously. It's $10,000. And it's an award that recognizes a book published in the previous year that demonstrates exceptional artistry and vision. Right? And I think this book has both of those qualities in great strength. And when we sat down, it took a while to go through those 220 books, and we read through and made cuts and made cuts and made cuts. And then when we came to our final judging meeting, the 3 judges, Bruce Brown, Jean Dubrow, and I, we sat down in Aura, in the coffee shop. You've seen some of us and maybe all of us in there before. We sat down with our stacks of finalists, and all 3 of us had this book on the top of the stack, because we had all decided this is the one. This is the one that we couldn't shake. And I think it was such a powerful book, at least for me, because the poems have this kind of distilled clarity that so quickly, shifts into a strangeness, right? That is surprising, that's haunting. I think they're beautiful meditations on loss and change. And I think poem by poem, the book is astonishing. But I think the other thing, so that's the artistry, that's part of the artistry of it, right? But the other thing, I think the thing that suggests the vision of the book is the remarkable way in which the title, that operating metaphor that guides the whole book, gives us a collection of cities, right? Cities that are filled with heartbreak and wonder, both. And I'm grateful we had the chance to choose this book, and I'd like to bring David up to talk for a little bit about writing this book and answer your questions. So let's, first of all, give a big round of applause to David Keplinger.
Well, thank you, Corey. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Bruce and Lisa, for making all of this possible. Yeah, I guess I could just open it to questions about the book.
Could you begin by just talking about where the book came from, how it came into being, how you kind of thought about shaping it into this version of it?
Well, we have a lot of PhD candidates and maybe some MA candidates in the audience tonight, and some undergraduates too. So over the course of writing the book, when you're writing, whether it be your first book or whether it be your fifth book, you begin to write into your preoccupations, your curiosities, your obsessions, not knowing what's going to happen and where this is going to take you. At the time, I was coming back from a sabbatical where I traveled to 4 different continents searching for writing communities in English, and talking to students in those programs. I went to South Africa, I went to Australia, I spoke to various communities throughout the United States and throughout D.C. where I live. I was in Europe. And I was writing a blog along the way. It was called Prosperous Departures. And as I went from city to city, I also went to Asia. I spent some time in Japan and stayed at a monastery in Japan. And along the way, I was taking pictures, and I was thinking about these places and how those writing communities were defined by the landscapes that they grew out of. And I didn't know what I was writing at the time. It started out as a blog. And then the poems shortly thereafter began to trickle in. This is something I've never talked about in terms of where the book emerged from. But I'll tell you, in the middle of my trip, I was on the other side of the world. I was in Australia. I got a call from my sister that my mother was dying. And she had already been sick and was in and out of the hospital, but had urged me to go on this trip. And promised me that if anything looked bad, that she would call me back. And she didn't call me back, but my sister did. So I was in Australia, and in the middle of this trip, which was about departing and going away, I realized that the prosperous departure, which comes from Shakespeare, the idea that in a steady metrical current, there's got to be one little prosperous departure that brings about the emphasis in the line. So the kind of trick that happened to me during my time away was that I was thinking that the prosperous departure was about going away from home, but in fact the prosperous departure was that in the middle of my trip I had to go back. And all of the emphasis was around this rush home to see my mother. She ended up rallying, and I spent 2 weeks with her, and then I went off to South Africa at that point and continued my trip until I came home. And we ended up going to Paris together 2 months later. So she did pass away, and the book goes into that quite a bit. But it was at that moment that I began to see the link between this far-awayness and this close-at-handness that a lot of the poems delve into. And there are poems in there about my mother's death, and poems in there about my father's death, but also about the different cities that we inhabit, not just literally, but also figuratively. So the book is divided. If those of you read it might recognize that the section titles are a little strange. One is called The City of Birth. The other one is called The City of Texts, and the third is called The City of Domes. The city of birth is, of course, the city that we're born into, but it's also the city of the body, and how the body is always giving birth to new bodies. The body that I have now is not the same one that I had when I was writing this book, or the same one that I had when I was traveling 7 years ago, or the same one that I was born in. So we're constantly inhabiting these new spaces, as days and years go by. But we never really know. We wake up on our 10th birthday and someone says, how's it feel to be 10? And it feels the same as 9. We don't know that this is going on, but it's going on all the time. We're giving a birth to a new body, a new body, a new body. So the opening poems are about that. And they're also about the light in our body that we learn to conceal. And then the City of Texts, I'm a literary translator. I do collaborations with Northern European poets, and I teach a class on translation at American University. So in the City of Texts, I was thinking about language as a kind of body, or language as a kind of city. How language can be transferable, how one word can be switched for another word to mean basically the same thing, but how language is also untranslatable. How one city is never exactly like another city, although they have some of the same structures and some of the same recognizable features. One city is never really exactly like another, the way one word can never be like another, or one language's phrase can never be like another. And Octavio Paz calls this the immobility of the sign. It's what makes translating poetry so impossible and so awesome. And then the third section is called City of Domes, and this is the tricky one for me. In our culture, we are so obsessed with revealing things, with unveiling things. And there are also things in me that I revere by keeping them hidden, by acknowledging the hiddenness of things that we can't know. And so the City of Domes looks at objects, whether it be a glass of milk or whether it be a piece of steel that fell off a building in 9/11. It's the object that holds a kind of hiddenness that I can revere without trying to find out what it is or trying to know what it is. And so this took years. This took me like writing 5 times the poems that ended up in this book. But I'll tell you this, those of you who are working on your dissertations, once you find out that that's what your book is doing, you see all of these gaps, these beautiful gorges, and you know that you can fill them up with new poems. And right at the end of the project, you begin to just write and write and write. I call it writing into the book. And filling up those gaps now that you see how all of these parts connect. It's really a wonderful thing. It's my favorite part. Once I figure out how to organize the book, it helps me so much in putting it all together, gluing it into a collage. So what questions might you have? Or I could just keep talking, but let me ask you if you have any questions. Yes.
Can you talk more about the management of timeless of the poems? There's like used to be a range. You go from like I think there's like dinosaur years to like now, and like it's really interesting how we're able to go from way far back to present and make it work with the whole poem.
The Pleistocene, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Can you repeat the question?
The question is, can I talk about how time is treated in the book, whether it be prehistoric, distant time, or years within my own memory? There's a poem in the book where I'm talking about how it's possible to cross great distances in a state of grief. And how, even though you're in one city, you might hear your mother's voice in the middle of the night, or a cough in the middle of the night. And I think the same is true for time, whether it be time in my body, or whether it be the feeling of time within a relationship, that beautiful lightness, that unbearable lightness of being that happens in a relationship where it feels both heavy and light. You feel the years and you feel the moment at the same time. So I think that's true with history. I like to say that you can't write not history out of history, or you can't make not universe out of universe. And that feeling that we inhabit all of those times before us is alive in my poems, or at least I want it to be, because it's something that drives me back to the work. It's just something that makes me curious and gets me started in my writing. So I like to do that. Seamus Heaney talks about this. If you ever read his translation of Beowulf, the preface to the translation is superb. It's the best preface to any translation I've ever read. And he talks about how he struggled with the idea that as a person who was born in Ireland and who feels the dagger of the loss of the Irish language, how can he approach this job of bringing the Anglo-Saxon, which is the language of occupation for him, into the present and making it beautiful? And then he realized that there were some words that the Irish language and the Anglo-Saxon language shared, and he realized he felt the far-flungness of the word, he calls it. And there's a kind of far-flungness of where we are, the dirt that we're standing on, the stuff of other people who are dead and their things are gone, but there's something of them that remains here, that we're living on top of. And that feeling of layered on topness is something that I'm trying to get at too, the far-flungness of this present moment. Yes, hi.
Could you talk about your relationship with form and how you make choices for form and content?
Yeah. Do you have a specific poem? Because I could talk about one, but I'm curious which one you're thinking of.
I mean, the one that comes to mind is the Brahms.
The Ghazal, yeah. Could I read that one? This is based on the words of Leon Fleischer, who was a concert pianist, considered a prodigy, who early in his career suffered from focal dystonia in his hand and was not able to play the piano anymore. And so for the rest of his career, he made music for one-handed piano. And then, with the introduction of Botox into the market, this is what happened to him. With Botox, he sat in his doctor's office, told the story of this on NPR about 12 years ago. Sat in his doctor's office, they injected Botox into his wrist, and he felt his hand come to life again, suddenly. Because the dystonia is like your hand turns to stone. And the Botox just loosened it. And he sat at a piano that day and played this Brahms that the poem mentions. So the feeling, and then it brings tears to my eyes every time I think of it. The first album he made with his second hand is called Two Hands. So this is called the Brahms. Those years I thought of little but the Brahms. The left hand grew bored. Play Brahms, I told the right. But the hand hit the keys like a fist. The Brahms would travel from my brain along the right of my shoulder, and then from triceps into bone, where it would die, or almost die. All right. Or it hung like a fish in cold shallows. The Brahms suspended, not dead. Then my constant urge to write the thing or force it down my arm. To play the Brahms, my teacher scolded, you have to listen. And he was right. First to listen to the quarter notes as they began like breaths. First to hear the language of my right. Brahms, play. Play the fingers of the hands, Brahms. Make me your instrument. Your left hand, your right. This is an interesting poem for me because it took me 12 years to write. When I first heard that interview, I wrote a poem that I sent off to a magazine and it won a prize. And I thought, well, okay, if any of my poems are done, that one's done. And it sat there in a manuscript that I eventually cut it from because I wasn't satisfied with it at all. Because it was free verse, and it was just a mess of lines. But I think that the writing was maybe similar, but the form wasn't in conversation with the subject matter. But here with the Ghazal, it felt more aligned with what I was trying to do. The refrain line is right, 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 which kind of brings out his obsession with the right hand. The left hand grew bored. Play Brahms, I told the right. So first of all, his obsession comes out in that. And then it's this word that's all the way on the right hand of the page too, which I kind of liked as well. And then with the couplets, each one kind of using right in a different way. It's a little bit like, playing a tune. You've got these notes, but the notes in confluences of ways are saying different things all the time. So it felt exactly right for the poem. And when I decided on the ghazal, it all came together. And I think that's the answer to the question, that the form, if it feels like an imposition, if it feels like you're wrestling that angel, then it's probably not the right choice. But that wrestling match will get you somewhere. It'll take you to another question or another challenge that eventually will lead you to the form. Whether it be a ghazal, whether it be a sonnet, whether it be blank verse, or whether it be free verse, or whether it be a prose poem. All of those poems are like mood music for the kind of scene that you're writing. So if you have this romantic scene on the beach and you have the mood music, the theme song to Jaws, there's something happening there, right? You've got the stuff in front of you, the romantic scene, but the mood music changes how it means. And that's true for the form too. So there's something very organized and very fixed about this form that I really loved. And so it wasn't a free verse poem. Somebody else? Yes? Is that a half question right there, a half hand?
I was going to ask, what really inspired you to create this piece? Like you talked about before. It's what's the perspective? What's the reason why I'm thinking this man best that from take this disease, which didn't allow him to play this piece. How did that affect your mindset, so to speak, and how you went about creating the book?
It's a good question. Why do we choose the things that we write about? I look at this book that I wrote and I wonder how I got there, now that it's separate from me for a year. But I will tell you this, that this story of Leon Fleischer has something to do with me. It has something to do with my frozenness, and it has something to do with my unloosening. And it happens at the beginning of the book, so I'm positive that it serves a purpose as a kind of prelude, like Puck coming out and saying, "This is what you shall see tonight, my friends. You shall see frozenness, and you shall see unloosening." And having it there at the beginning of the book was a completely intuitive, unconscious choice for me. But that's certainly the prelude of this manuscript. Yeah, follow up?
So you wrote the piece because it was relatable to your situation. You found related yourself in the piece, or a bit of like what you were going through. As you said, that feeling of frozeness, you might have related to the end of there's this period in my life where I just feel so stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And now that this piece and this book is done, you feel free to sometimes you said, detach from you can now look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's elegantly said. And I also know this. It's that he's demanding things of the hand, and the hand doesn't begin to move until he says, "Make me your instrument." So it's a realignment of one's values. Who's really writing the poem? Is it me writing the poem who has these ideas about what the poem's going to be? Or is it this higher mind that sees the associations and knows them and wants me to get out of the way? And then I get out of the way and the poem appears. Sometimes it takes 12 years for the poet to get out of the freaking way. But eventually you do if you're stubborn like I am.
How often do you allow yourself to get
Totally. How often do I let myself get out of the way? I write every day. And what does that mean? It means that sometimes I'll write for 5 minutes. Sometimes I'll write for 15 minutes. Or I could have a string of months where I give myself an hour. And you know what happens? Something comes. I'll write for that 5 minutes and maybe I'll take out a comma. Or I'll write for that 15 minutes and I'll think that I've fixed a poem and the next day come back and see that I need to go back to the earlier version. But it only firms up my idea that the earlier version was right. So I find out, like Theodore Rilke goes, by going where I need to go. I just keep writing into the book, even when it's not yet a book, even when it's just some lines on a page in a Word document. And then eventually I try to step back after taking a couple months away from that project, go on to another project, do some translation or something, take a step back, and then I look at that again, and then I begin to see the correlations. I see how this is a collage or a Venn diagram, and I say, okay, this circle and that circle and that circle, cities, bodies, texts, things, what? And then I see how in the middle of the Venn diagram, they're all kind of doing this. They're all overlapping just in that little space. And then these poems go away, and then what's left is that collage that all the parts speak to each other within. Something else? Yeah.
I was really taken with the poems in City of Texts about the ancestor and the journal found, and I wonder if you could say more about how that, like, did you always know about the journal? Or?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. Because that was a project that I couldn't let go of. And the story is long, but I'll make it quick. In 1998 or so, my aunt gave me a copybook that had been written by my great-great-grandfather when he was 15 years old until he was about 21. And it encompassed the years of 1851 to 1860. And it had a bunch of poems in it. She gave it to me because she knew that I was interested in poetry. I was fresh out of graduate school, and she said, hey, maybe